It was a brooch. Now, weirdly, this wasn't the only expensive piece of jewelry that Marion owned. If the killer had really wanted to rob her, he could have helped himself before he walked out. But for whatever reason, the brooch was the only thing he took from 83-year-old Marion. So the police arrived pretty soon afterward and they began investigating. Right away, they determined that there was no sign of forced entry. This told the police that the killer must have been someone she knew or trusted. She had to have opened the door so her murderer could come inside. But given how isolated Marion was and how few friends she had, they couldn't imagine who the attacker could be. They put out a call for tips. Few witnesses came forward. One young woman said she saw someone run out of Marion Gilchrist's apartment at around 7 p.m. The running man actually bumped into her and then kept going. Her description did match the same man that Helen and Arthur had already reported. The suspect was clean shaven, he had dark hair, which was just generic enough that they could have been about anyone. But a few days later, on Christmas, someone approached the police station with an even better tip in this case. This man said that he suspected someone named Oscar Slater. Oscar was a German immigrant who was new in town. He also had dark hair, he had recently shaven off his mustache, and ever since December 21st, which was the day of Marion's, Oscar had been trying to sell a pawn ticket he had for a crescent-shaped diamond-studded brooch. Assuming the brooch was the one that had gone missing from Marion's apartment, it sounded like Oscar was afraid that he'd be caught and arrested if he returned for it. And even more suspiciously, Oscar did have a criminal history. For his whole life, he'd been drifting from one town to another. During that time, he'd used a lot of different aliases to avoid arrest. In fact, Oscar Slater wasn't even his real name. So the police also suspected he was involved in some kind of illegal bookkeeping, and they'd been investigating him for a while for that possible crime, even before anyone had connected him to Marion's case. So the police put out another call for tips. This time they want to learn more about Oscar, particularly any information that put him at the scene of the crime. They learned that several weeks before the break-in, a dozen witnesses saw a man who fit Oscar's description standing on the street outside of Marion's apartment. People are like, maybe Oscar was casing the joint. The fact that the murder happened during the slim 10-minute window that Marion was alone did make it seem like the killer must have been watching. But the most damning evidence against Oscar was the fact that he fled the country less than a week after the murder.